the transaction amount. And that will also be, coupled with a hash. Now, a hash is basically like the fingerprint of the transaction. It's alphanumeric, code that's generated, and it's going to basically, be at the forefront of the block. You might as well say it's going to headline the block, the header of the block, which we'll get into. Now, with that, you have that block put into a network. So the people, the miners, the Bitcoin miners, they basically mine the network. They are the people that's going to validate this block to make sure that the transaction is valid. And in the transaction, they're going to make sure that, cost is right, the name of the business or the people, so on and so forth. Your crypto address, you're going to have all that has to add up and a bunch of other stuff. So once they validate that and they say that's cool, they add that block to the blockchain. So once it's added to the blockchain, then, it's legit. It's in the chain, it's legit. Now, once it's in the blockchain, let's say the block that's put in there is block number 4. It's going to have the code, which is the hash from the previous blocks that came before it. Okay. So that's how you make it a chain. So it's going to have this new hash and the hash of the block before it, and they're going to link up. So what happens is once that new block is created, that new hash is created, that hash is going to be put into every block after it, so on and so forth. It's going to go back and forth. The new hash and then the previous hash, so on and so forth. So if you try to steal a block, you want to steal crypto, you have to edit the hash. Plain and simple. The hash has to be edited and you have to know what those numbers are. So once you do that, then, then every block before or what have you, after this new block, it's confusing, has to be edited as well. So the whole thing is computers are fast enough to where you can go ahead and do this split second. Nobody's going to notice. So to get around that problem, they came up with what's called proof of work. Okay. So proof of work is basically these Bitcoin miners, these people in the P2P network, regular people, which understand this, anybody, any person can go and jump onto the, the blockchain network. Anybody can do it. All you need is the software and you need equipment, which we'll get into. And anybody can jump on there and you can become a Bitcoin miner. So what happens is people, they go ahead and validate all this information. So what they did with the proof of work, the creator of Bitcoin, he came up with this whole system to where, they slow down the process of creating a new block. So now it's like, every 10 minutes or so, a block can be created, which gives the miners, the people who's validating all this information, time to see if somebody edited a block or changed it. So if you try to change a block, it's enough time for them to catch it, and then they won't allow that block into the chain. The only way the crypto can be validated, the Bitcoin, is if it's in the chain, and it has to be validated by more than 50% of the people in the P2P network in order for it to be, Bitcoin. So now what does this have to do with energy, power? So the whole thing is you have people mining Bitcoin. You have people validating this process, and you need special equipment to do so, because you're talking about calculating a freaking astronomical amount of alphanumeric, letters and numbers. So to do this, you need to have a crazy powerful computer. You need a lot of processing power, but Bitcoin requires special equipment to do so that costs a lot of money, a bunch of money. So you get this equipment and you can go ahead and start, Bitcoin mining. And if you do it correctly, you can get actually paid Bitcoin. Because I know you're going to ask yourself, well, why would a person, spend their time, going into the network and validating other people's transaction? What do they get out of it? Well, what they get out of it is if you can create these codes, these alphanumeric numbers to be validated, then you can get paid Bitcoin for doing so. So this is kind of complicated. So you got to understand, just like the dollar, we have to print paper money to basically coincide with the rise of the economy. So if the economy is going up and the price of stuff is going up, we got to print more money. And sometimes we print money for huge economic situations or war, so on and so forth. We got to print out money. Bitcoin is digital, but we can't just keep printing it up over and over again because, it'll be too much. It has to be some type of regulation or system to it. So what's built into the system is this whole Bitcoin mining thing to where, it's crazy. When you have the miners, they go and they're going to validate this information in a transaction, right? And they're going to take this transaction and a bunch of other transactions and put them into a memory pool. So the memory pool is basically where the transactions go while they wait to become a block. Okay. It's confusing, but it's all going to make sense in the end. Trust me. They wait for it to become a block. So you're going to have a miner come and verify all the information in this whole thing. And then they go ahead and they take each of these transactions and, they basically group them together and they add their own transaction to those transactions. So their transaction will probably be the first transaction, and that transaction is put there. So once they complete this, this mining, if they successfully complete it first, I'll explain in a second, then they can make sure they get paid, from the transaction. So you're going to have all of these transactions lined up. And then, basically called, as I said, it's a memory pool. And then you have what's called a root tree or a hash tree. And it's the Merkle root. So each of these transactions is going to be hashed. And when I say hashed, I basically mean alphanumeric code is going to be generated. So if you ever, sign up for, online anything, sometimes they generate a password for you and it's be a bunch of letters and numbers. If you ever cracked anything or ever used the keygen generator on a computer, that's basically the same thing. The keygen generator generates a key code that you're going to use to basically, run the product. Happens with Photoshop, a lot of programs. You've probably seen it before. But so each transaction has a hash created, which is an alphanumeric number that's going to be created specifically for that transaction. So that's done. And then the transactions are coupled, meaning, two at a time. And then those two are hashed, meaning those two, they make a alphanumeric number for those two. And then so on and so forth, like a tree until it comes to one, number, like a pyramid almost. Well, exactly. So once the root tree is completed, that number, that root tree number is put into a block with the what's called a nonce, which is a random number. So you have that root tree number, that alphanumeric number. You have a nonce, which the N stands for number only used, and then it's ONCE, once. So a nonce, and then you have that get hashed into what's going to be called a block identifier, which is going to be like, kind of the fingerprint of the block. So difficult, I know, crazy. So what happens is that number is basically regulated by the system, and it has to begin with a certain amount of zeros. So what they're trying to do is basically what I said before, like a keygen generator. They're trying to generate a number. So if you came up with a password of your own, you're fine. Not in this system, but I'm just saying, if you're using one of those programs, or if you're signing up for a website and you use your own password, you're cool. If not, if they have to generate a password, let's say if you lost your password and it has to generate a password to send you, then this is what it's going to use, something like this. So the whole thing is I can't generate a password that was used already to give to you. So I'm going to get around that. So, zeros is the best way to do it. So certain amount of zeros it has to start with. And basically what the miner has to do is come up with that number. So we're talking about, it's a bunch of puzzles and cryptexts. Remember, this is going to make sense to people. Remember what it's called, captchas? And those little cryptic things you have to do. You see them all the time. You got to, show me the pictures with the bicycle. Okay, you match those up. Boom, it's legit. It's the same type of situation. So what they're basically going to do, and that's kind of like a puzzle, believe it or not, what they have to do is match this up. They have to come up with a number that's going to fit with the program, with the system that hasn't been used, that will, that will work. It's real difficult to get into. So what they do, and it's a bunch of people doing this, what they do is you can tweak the node. And the node, remember, it has to be one specific number. That's it. So let's say the number is 1. If I change it to 2, then the identifier number will change. If I change to 3, it will change again. So I'm going to keep tweaking that node until that number changes to a point where it matches up and it becomes valid. Then I will submit that number to the rest of the P2P network and the people to validate this number as being a number that hasn't been used. They'll validate it. And if they validate it, they'll put it into the blockchain, which that will, I'll earn Bitcoin from doing that. Somebody does it before me, they get the money. So this is done with every transaction. It's people online doing it all the time. And it's not easy to do because you have a hash difficulty. And that's that number that has to be, changed with the zeros. The hash difficulty is basically dependent on the amount of power the person has. So the power is allocated. So a person they have a certain portion of the power that is basically produced within the system. So your odds of, creating a hash that's going to be accepted is really depending on the proportion of energy you have within the network, plain and simple. So what you can do is you can form a mining pool, and that's you getting with different people that have different amounts of, proportion power on the network. And when they get together, they create these. And as you can see here, this is a lot of equipment. So you can imagine how much power is being used and generated to basically process all of these, transactions to mine Bitcoin. And we're talking about just Bitcoin here. And there's other, cryptos that's being mined besides Bitcoin. But Bitcoin alone takes up a shitload of power to mine. So for the Bitcoin network alone, it takes 116 trillion watts per hour. So to put that in perspective, that's about 0.5% of the entire, world's energy consumption. And by comparison, we have the internet and we have data, data collection, the internet basically. And that takes up 200 terawatts per hour, which is about 0.8% of the energy used, globally. So we're talking about a lot of energy. And I know you guys probably seen a lot of reports and people talking about, these whole pools causing power outages. And it's crazy. It's a huge power consumption that is being used. And it's something a lot of people didn't know about when understanding how this thing works, because you got to look at it. You have a chance to really put together some computers, sit down and, run a program and make millions of dollars. Crazy money. Just buying the equipment. So the more equipment you can afford to buy, the greater chance you have of, getting into a pool and mining crypto. I never knew, it costs that much energy to process. And, I build computers. I built my computer at home and I know, it takes a lot of processing. And, you have a lot of computing you need to do. You need a lot of processors and they get hot. So you need a big space to put them in. You need you need fans, you need air. And anybody who works with computers, you understand this. This is a huge issue when you think about the energy consumption that all of these, computers, the software and this hardware is generating. And this is the thing that Tesla was talking about. It's too much energy, it's consuming too much energy. It's going to be a problem. Think about that, what that's going to mean in a second. But you have this and you have all these people going ham, trying to get these, trying to mine Bitcoin and get this money. The thing is, you have more demand than ever for Bitcoin. As I said, more and more companies are using it. More and more stores are accepting it. And they also stated by the year 2140, there will be no more Bitcoin mining. So you better get all the Bitcoin you can generate, because by then they calculated that, they will never need to mine any more Bitcoin. It should be enough to last digitally, despite, depending on what we do, depending on how things go. So 2140, which none of us will be here by then. So you got your whole lifetime to go ahead and mine Bitcoin if you want to get into that. A lot of money to be made, but also costs a lot of money to get into and a lot of power. It's something that you can't do at a house, which is why these people got money and they buying up warehouses and old prisons and all kinds of stuff to store all this equipment in to process this stuff. It sounds stupid, sounds crazy, and it don't make sense. got to be an easier way, you understand, to do this. And it's going to make sense in a second. So then we have Ethereum. And Ethereum does what Bitcoin does with money, but with software. You understand? With digital products. So with Ethereum, and Ethereum is where you get the whole NFT craze, non-fungible token. So a non-fungible token is basically something that can't be broken down. You understand? So like you got $20 bill, I could break that down to 2 tens, or I could break it down to 4 fives. Like with the NFT, that can't be broken down. Like if you have a digital artwork, I can't break that down into, 4. It's just one of a kind. And this is what these NFTs are about. You basically buying an NFT for your product, your digital product, and it's going to be the most secure product online. And then now you don't have to worry about nobody stealing it. The transfer of ownership is easy, and you can basically purchase NFTs and Ether. So Ether is like Bitcoin, and that basically runs the entire Ethereum network. It's Ether. So have an art show, or you want to sell digital product, buy NFT for it, and then you sell it through that. That way the transaction happens, no crazy business, and you're done. These transactions are done with smart contracts. And the smart contract is the feature. Is all of this is about to come together. Smart contract. So a smart contract is basically your agreement between the person that's you're going to be doing business with, to where nothing can be changed. So as of now, if that's why you have closing costs, that's why you have lawyers. If I do a contract, then I can go on ahead and hand it off to the lawyer, who can change something after I done signed it already, and then you sign it, and then later down the road something was changed, and I'm like, it's already binding. I signed it. It was changed. It's an issue. It's also a way to keep people from out of reneging on contracts. So it's digital. It's something that's used in Major League Baseball uses it, and a bunch of other programs are starting to use it, because a lot of people are starting to use Ethereum to create decentralized programs. So basically now, the regulations you have to worry about in creating a program now, you have to deal with if you want to put it on a certain network. With Ethereum, you don't have to worry about that. And you can basically create any program you want, put it on Ethereum, and then accept the Ether as payment, which of course you can break down into cash eventually, or Bitcoin. And it's legit. It's secure. So now, how does all this translate into what's happening today? It just so happens that the biggest Bitcoin miners in the world, China, US, Russia, the creator of Ethereum was born in Russia. So you have the biggest suction of power happening in these 3 countries that's on the brink of war, not by coincidence.